She stood in the back of the lab, a quiet 17-year-old in a faded gray hoodie and worn sneakers, just trying to blend in. Naomi Carter wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. She was part of a high school outreach program, invited only to observe. But when the elite quantum math symposium opened for questions and Naomi dared to raise her hand, the room shifted. Dr. Klaus Weber smirked from the front. "She won't even understand the question," someone whispered. But Naomi didn't just understand it. She rewrote the answer and turned the entire world of advanced mathematics on its head. Naomi Carter never planned to end up in a room full of world-renowned mathematicians. At 17, she was still finishing her senior year at Oakland Public High, a school where textbooks were outdated and the advanced placement classes ran out of funding 2 years ago. Her life revolved around caring for her grandmother, catching 2 buses to school, and trying to stay invisible enough not to attract trouble. But numbers made sense. She didn't know when it started. Maybe it was during those long evenings sitting by the radiator, flipping through her uncle's old calculus books. Maybe it was when she figured out how to solve equations without understanding the language, just feeling the patterns. Whatever it was, it grew. A quiet obsession. When Naomi was selected for the Future Scholars Program at UC Berkeley, she thought it was a mistake. She'd never even been on a college campus. The letter said, "Observe," so she did. Quietly, respectfully, always a step behind the other students from private schools and tech academies. But the day she stepped into the quantum mathematics lab, everything changed. The lab was ice cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the unspoken hierarchy in the room. Glass walls, polished floors, stainless steel desks lined with monitors. Students from prestigious backgrounds filled the rows like they'd been born there. Naomi? She stood near the back, clutching her spiral notebook like a lifeline, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. She wasn't on any list. She didn't have credentials. She was just observing. Dr. Klaus Weber, a man whose presence alone could silence a room, adjusted his bow tie and began his presentation. He didn't just teach mathematics, he dissected it. With a thick German accent and colder eyes than the marble floors, he moved through complex quantum equations like they were children's puzzles. His reputation? Legendary. His patience for outsiders? Non-existent. Naomi scribbled furiously, trying to keep up. She didn't understand everything, but she recognized shapes, patterns, tiny bridges between concepts others seemed to skim past. Every time Dr. Weber dropped a complex transformation on the screen, she tilted her head, seeing the hidden logic behind the noise. But still, she kept quiet. "Any questions?" he asked, his voice smooth but sharp, the kind of voice that dares you to challenge it. No one moved. Then, without meaning to, maybe without even realizing, Naomi's hand rose. "You ever done something before your brain could stop you?" Dr. Weber spotted her immediately. "Yes?" he asked, his eyebrow arching. "You are one of the visitors?" She nodded, already regretting it. "What is your question?" he said, tone flat. Naomi hesitated, then said softly, "The boundary values in line 6, don't they contradict the assumption made in step 2? The silence was instant. No coughs, no whispers, just stillness. And then, a ripple of poorly suppressed laughter. A boy in the third row muttered, "Seriously? She doesn't even go here." Someone behind Naomi whispered, "Did she even understand the topic?" Dr. Weber didn't laugh. That would have been too human. Instead, he stepped away from the projector and pointed to the chalkboard. "Perhaps," he said, "you would like to demonstrate your concerns before the group." And just like that, the trap was sprung. Naomi froze. You could almost hear her heart thudding in the silence. Her hand twitched at her side. "You may decline, of course," he said, turning his back to her. "If you are not prepared. Where are you watching this from right now? Because wherever you are, your kitchen, your car, wrapped in a blanket on your bed, you know that moment when someone powerful invites you to fail in front of everyone." Naomi stepped forward. The walk felt longer than it was. Each step clicked against the tile like a countdown to embarrassment. A couple of students leaned forward with interest, others with smirks. Dr. Weber handed her the chalk like it was a test she'd already failed. He drew an equation, brutal, unforgiving, dense with variables that twisted like vines. Then he stepped aside. "Please," he said, "educate us." Naomi's hand trembled as she lifted the chalk. At first, nothing made sense. The numbers blurred. Her throat tightened. Her cheeks flushed so hot they burned. She glanced at the room. No one believed in her. No one even saw her, except maybe you do, right now. Because maybe you've been in her shoes, the outsider, the invisible, the one everyone dismisses, until you speak. Naomi looked back at the board. Slowly, a shape emerged. Not in the chalk, in her mind. A familiar structure. A hidden pattern from something she'd studied once at night on her grandmother's living room floor. She made a mark, then another. Her hand steadied. The room began to quiet. No more whispers, no more laughter, only the scratch of chalk. Dr. Weber narrowed his eyes. Students leaned forward. Naomi worked quickly now, confidently. Her logic was tight, her methods unconventional. She wasn't reciting a memorized formula. She was building something new, right in front of them. Dr. Weber's expression twisted. Confusion? No. Concern. "Where did you learn that substitution?" he asked, his voice lower now. Naomi didn't answer. She was somewhere else, in her mind, in the same world she'd visited every night for years, the world of numbers and silence and flow. When she placed the final answer at the bottom corner and stepped back, the room didn't erupt. It inhaled. Dr. Weber approached the board like it might bite him. His finger hovered over one line, then another, then dropped. He turned to face her, and for the first time that day, the arrogance cracked. "That," he said stiffly, "is mathematically sound. You ever seen a giant blink?" The room didn't clap. Not yet. They didn't know if they were allowed to. But a shift had happened, a tremor in the hierarchy. An outsider had just spoken the language of giants, and they'd understood her. But that was only the beginning. Dr. Weber wasn't used to losing control of a room, and make no mistake, that's what Naomi had just done. In one sequence of chalk strokes, she'd shifted the attention, cracked the silence, and left his authority trembling. So he did what men like him always do when threatened. He changed the rules. "Very well," he said, wiping the board clean with sharp, aggressive movements. "Let's see how deep your understanding truly runs." He turned back to the crowd. "This next equation," he announced, "is from my current research on quantum information theory. It has not yet been solved." Murmurs spread across the lab. A few students glanced at each other, uncertain whether this was a lecture or a duel. Weber filled the board with an avalanche of variables. Not elegant this time. Dense, aggressively complex. Symbols from multiple branches of theoretical mathematics, scrawled in tight succession like a wall meant to repel. "This," he said coldly. Should be more appropriate. Naomi stood frozen. It didn't look like any equation she'd seen. It was fragmented, foreign, chaotic. Her brain screamed to retreat. Ever had that moment where you feel the blood drain from your face? What would you do? Would you walk away? She almost did. Dr. Weber looked at her, already turning his back, already dismissing her. If you prefer to return to the observers section, he said. No one would blame you. Naomi heard the words, but what echoed in her mind was something else. Her grandmother's voice years ago, whispering during one of those nights they shared peanut butter sandwiches by flashlight. You don't have to be invited, baby. Just step in. She stepped forward. The room quieted again. Some people sighed. Others looked away, not wanting to witness her fall. Naomi picked up the chalk. She stared at the board. It made no sense. Seconds passed, then a minute. Her hand didn't move. Her breath became shallow. Perhaps we can... Dr. Weber began. Wait, Naomi said. And then... clarity. Not total, but enough. A structure. A pulse within the chaos. Something about the coefficients. The symmetry between the top left quadrant and the baseline structure. She remembered a late-night article she'd read on a borrowed tablet, squinting at the screen in the dark while her grandma snored beside her. It was about quantum compression and multivariate encryption. A term blinked in her mind. Rotational eigenvectors in a limited field. She made her first mark. Then another. Dr. Weber fell silent. Students leaned forward again. Her hand moved. Faster now, not with confidence but with purpose. She wasn't solving the entire equation. She was building a bridge through the jungle. Halfway through, she hit a wall. Her chalk stopped mid-air. You could feel the pause from wherever you're watching right now. Did you hold your breath too? Naomi stepped back. The board taunted her. She saw no way forward. Dr. Weber smiled. A commendable effort, he began, already reaching for the chalk. She didn't move. Instead, she stared. She stared so hard the board blurred again, not with fear this time, but with concentration. Then it happened. One symbol. Misplaced. A notation Weber had used from a rare European dialect of mathematical shorthand. She recognized it from a PDF she'd printed years ago from an obscure forum. She erased a single line and replaced it. The effect cascaded. Suddenly, the jungle cleared. The equation folded into itself. The chaos revealed a hidden rhythm. Naomi gasped, then moved. She wrote rapidly now, each transformation cleaner than the last. By the time she stepped back again, her chest was heaving and her fingers ached. The room? Still, silent, shocked. Dr. Weber approached the board slowly, reading every line. He didn't speak. Not at first. Then softly, "This is not standard." A professor near the back whispered, "It's better." Naomi looked at them all, unsure whether to feel pride or panic. You ever do something great and immediately doubt it? She gripped the chalk tighter. Dr. Weber turned to face the room, but his voice when he spoke, her head changed. Not humbled. Not yet. But something cracked in him. She has shifted the foundational base, he said. No one clapped. But no one laughed either. Naomi stood at the front of the lab, not as a visitor anymore, but as a problem solver, a threat, a name none of them would forget. And what happened next? That changed everything. The board still hummed with Naomi's final chalk marks when the door creaked open at the back of the lab. Heads turned. A woman stepped in, mid-40s, black tailored suit, high heels striking the floor like punctuation marks. Her ID badge glinted. Dr. Evelyn Marshall, Director of Quantum Applications at the California Institute for Advanced Mathematics. She scanned the room, her eyes narrowing at the board, then at Naomi, then back again. The hush in the room turned into breath-holding silence. "I was told there was something here I needed to see," Dr. Marshall said flatly. A grad student pointed. "It's her work," he said, nodding toward Naomi. Dr. Marshall moved forward like a judge approaching a case file. She took in the equations line by line, her brow furrowed, then slowly arched. "Who applied this boundary layer collapse?" Naomi raised her hand hesitantly. "I did." Dr. Weber cut in quickly. "She's not a student. She's with the outreach group. No formal training. Likely just mimicking." Dr. Marshall held up a hand to silence him. "You," she said, locking eyes with Naomi. "Where did you learn to apply rotational eigenvectors this way?" Naomi hesitated. "I didn't learn it in a class. I just followed the flow. The variables wouldn't settle until I anchored them this way." Dr. Marshall studied her, then looked back at the board. "She just replicated a model our teams at Caltech and MIT have been developing for the past 7 months," she said to the room. "Except she did it better." A ripple of shocked whispers. Grad students exchanged glances. One of them pulled out a phone and took a photo of the board. "Wait," another said. "You mean this isn't published yet?" "Not officially," Dr. Marshall replied. "But it's under review for the Journal of Quantum Structures, and she's anticipated the final step." Dr. Weber clenched his jaw. "This proves nothing. She followed intuition. That's not reproducible." "Neither was gravity when Newton first got hit by an apple," Dr. Marshall snapped. Naomi stood silently. "You ever feel a spotlight burn through you? Not with warmth, but scrutiny." But Naomi didn't flinch. Dr. Marshall turned back to her. "You said you're from Oakland Public?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm in the Future Scholars Outreach Group." Marshall's voice softened slightly. "You're 17?" Naomi nodded. Dr. Marshall turned to the room. "Someone document this entire board, every line, and get me her name and school. We'll need to follow up." A hush gave way to motion. Phones clicked, pens scribbled. Naomi remained in place. And that's when it happened. The first real shift. One of the grad students, the same boy who had laughed earlier, approached and offered his hand. "That was incredible," he said quietly. Another student clapped once, then another. Soon the lab was filled with a strange, soft applause, hesitant at first, but sincere. Dr. Weber didn't join, but even he had stepped back. Naomi's hands were still chalk-streaked, her hoodie sleeves pushed up. But something in her posture had changed. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was the center. And for the first time, the lab turned to listen. Take a breath. Because this moment right here, it's not just about chalk on a board. It's about every person who's ever been told to sit quietly. Every girl who dared to speak when no one expected her to. Where are you watching this from right now? Is it quiet where you are? Can you feel the silence in that lab? The shift in the air? If this story has hit something inside you, share it. Comment. Let us know. Have you ever been underestimated? Dismissed? What did you do about it? And now let's see what comes next for Naomi. The room slowly thinned out, but the echoes of what had just happened lingered like static in the air. Naomi remained by the chalkboard, her fingers still dusted white, her sleeves pushed back, her breathing only just starting to return to normal. For the first time in her life, People were looking at her not with pity, not with indifference, but with something like reverence. A group of grad students circled around her. One asked how she spotted the transformation. Another wanted to know if she had read Takahashi's latest draft. She shook her head. I just felt where it was stuck. Her voice was quiet, but her words were clear, and they listened. Evelyn Marshall didn't leave. She stood nearby, arms crossed, watching Naomi answer questions with a combination of awe and professional curiosity. She saw something rare, not just talent, but vision. Untaught and raw, yes, but unshakable. You realize what you did, right? Marshall asked her once the others had pulled back. That simplification you found, it's the same step my team has been chasing for months, and the way you arrived at it. Naomi looked down, a little overwhelmed. I've never had anyone to explain my thinking to before, she said honestly. Marshall smiled. Get used to it. For a moment things felt safe, like maybe the worst was over, like maybe this room, this building, even this university, might be opening its doors wider than it ever had before, but not everyone was celebrating. In the corner of the room, Dr. Weber stood stiff and unreadable. He hadn't approached Naomi. He hadn't said a word. His arms were crossed, his jaw set. When Marshall caught his eye, he looked away, but not before she saw the storm brewing. Outside, the sky had shifted. Long shadows stretched across the courtyard as the sun began to dip behind the towers of UC Berkeley. Naomi stepped out into the chill, hugging her arms across her chest, despite the heat still lingering on the pavement. She checked her phone. A new message from her grandmother. Dinner's hot, and I saw the live stream. I always knew. Naomi smiled, blinking quickly. Down the steps, her outreach group was already gathered by the van. Her chaperone waved her over, but Naomi lingered, taking one last look at the building that had, for a few strange and miraculous minutes, welcomed her. Behind her, through the glass doors, Dr. Marshall spoke with another faculty member. Naomi couldn't hear the words, but she saw the urgency in the gestures. Her name was being said. Opportunities were being built, but on another floor, in another room, something else was unfolding. Dr. Weber sat alone at his desk, the office dark except for the light of his monitor. He stared at the university's academic policy portal, then opened a blank email to Department Chair Subject, Unauthorized Participant in Restricted Lecture Environment, CC, Faculty Oversight Committee. He typed slowly, precisely. Every sentence framed not as a complaint, but as a concern. Every word chosen to raise red flags without appearing bitter. He ended with, "We must maintain standards. Informal participation undermines institutional rigor." He read it 3 times, then hit send. And just like that, the applause Naomi had heard hours earlier, the affirmation, the respect, the moment she thought would change everything, began to fade under the weight of the old system trying to reassert itself. Because, in places like this, power doesn't vanish quietly, and for every open door, there's always someone ready to close it again. But Naomi didn't know that yet. She sat quietly on the van ride home, watching the lights blur past her window, her fingers resting on a notebook she hadn't opened in weeks. Her mind was already racing again, not with fear, but with equations, ideas, possibilities, because even if the world wasn't done testing her, she wasn't done answering. 2 days passed. Naomi returned to Oakland, back to her routine, back to the world that never asked her about integrals or boundary conditions. But everything felt different now. Her mind kept circling that board, that equation, that hush in the lab when silence turned into attention. She had been seen. Dr. Marshall had kept her word. The day after the symposium, Naomi's school principal received a call, then an email, then a formal invitation, a summer research fellowship, fully funded, at one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. Naomi printed the letter 3 times. She taped one to her wall, folded one for her grandmother, and slipped one into her backpack, just in case she needed reminding that it had been real. But while she moved quietly in celebration, something else had been moving against her. At Berkeley, the email Weber had sent began to ripple. The department. Chair raised questions. How did a minor gain access to a restricted lecture? Was protocol breached? Did it reflect poorly on the university? A meeting was scheduled. Dr. Marshall wasn't surprised. She'd seen it happen before. How institutions protect themselves before celebrating breakthroughs. But she didn't expect the way it unfolded. When she arrived at the conference room, the tone was already set. Weber sat at one end of the table, posture stiff, tone calm. It's not about the girl, he said. It's about precedent, Marshall cut in. She's not just a girl. She's a mind we don't see often enough. Not because it doesn't exist, but because we rarely let it through the doors. Weber remained stone-faced. There are rules. If we bend them for one, we compromise them for all. Marshall laughed once bitterly. Except we both know the rules bend all the time, just not for kids from East Oakland who wear hoodies instead of honors cords. The dean shifted uncomfortably. What's your real concern, Klaus? Marshall pressed. That she embarrassed you? Weber's eyes finally met hers. Cold, honest. That she upended the hierarchy we've spent years building. There it was, the truth. Not about Naomi's performance, but about control. Do you hear yourself? Marshall said quietly. You'd rather keep the ladder intact than let someone climb it. She circumvented the process. She revealed its weakness. The room went quiet. Then the dean spoke. Dr. Marshall, we're not discrediting her work, but we must be cautious. Media attention is already circling. There are implications. Liability. You're afraid of a 17-year-old solving a problem too fast, she snapped. Weber stood. This isn't personal. No, Marshall said, rising as well. But for Naomi, it always was. Outside that room, Naomi remained unaware. She was helping her grandmother bag groceries, explaining her fellowship to a neighbor who barely understood what calculus was, writing in her notebook late at night, where no one could stop the equations from coming. But the storm was gathering. Marshall knew the pattern. Applause becomes doubt. Admiration curdles into control. She picked up her phone. Dialed. Naomi answered on the second ring. Hi, Naomi said, unsure. Hey, kid, Marshall replied. There's something I need to tell you. Because the moment Naomi stepped out of the shadows, she became more than a girl with chalk. She became a threat, and not everyone likes when the rules are rewritten in real time, especially not by someone who was never supposed to hold the pen. Naomi met Dr. Marshall the next day, not at a university, not at a conference room, but at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from her school. The kind of place where no one looked twice at a teenager in a hoodie or a scientist in a tailored coat. Marshall looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more human. They sat in a booth near the window. Naomi ordered tea. Marshall didn't touch her coffee. There's some pushback, Marshall began. Internal, political. You're not in trouble, but the opportunity may face delays. Naomi said nothing at first. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. Because I'm not supposed to be there, she said softly. Because you weren't invited through the right door, Marshall corrected. But that doesn't mean you don't belong in the room. Naomi looked up. Then how do I get through the door? Marshall paused, then pulled a thin folder from her bag. Inside, typed transcripts of Naomi's blackboard work, annotated by 3 senior researchers. There's another option, she said, but it's riskier. Naomi leaned in. We submit your work, anonymously, for peer review, Marshall explained. Not tied to your name, your age, your background. Just the math, let the work speak first, Naomi blinked. And then, if it's accepted, you reveal who you are, after the fact. They can't erase it once it's real. Naomi's heart pounded. You'd be submitting work to a journal that's rejected full PhDs, Marshall added. There's a real chance. It won't go through, Naomi swallowed. But there's also a chance it will. Yes, Marshall said. And if it does, there's no going back. Naomi didn't answer right away. She stared out the window. Across the street, 2 kids were walking home in uniform, backpacks heavy, heads down. She knew that walk. She remembered being those kids. And she thought, maybe someone needs to see me make it. I want to do it, Naomi said. But not anonymously. Marshall's eyes narrowed. You're sure? If I'm going to be in that world, I want to walk in with my name on the door. Silence hung for a moment. Then Marshall nodded. Slowly. Then we do it your way. The next week moved like a dream. Naomi's notebooks were scanned, cited, formatted. Marshall coached her through a bio, a statement of purpose. Naomi asked if she could include her grandmother's name in the acknowledgments. Of course, Marshall said. She got you here, but not everyone was helping. Weber found out about the submission, and he wasn't quiet about it. He called a meeting with the journal's advisory board, arguing that undocumented contributions threatened the integrity of peer review. That mentorship could too easily slide into favoritism. Marshall defended Naomi publicly. Privately, she received warnings. You're staking your credibility on a teenager, one colleague said. No, Marshall replied. I'm staking it on the math. But the real twist came 2 days later. Naomi was at school when her principal called her into the office. You've received mail, he said, confused. It was a thick envelope, from Berlin. Naomi opened it. Inside, a translated copy of a German article, academic, dense, but right in the middle, her equation, her exact transformation, with minor variation, stolen. Marshall confirmed it. The work had leaked. Someone had taken her board notes, translated them, and submitted them elsewhere. Under a different name. Naomi stared at the page. Cold. Still. She had expected resistance, even rejection. But theft? That was new. They're not just trying to stop you, Marshall said. They're trying to erase you. Naomi folded the article slowly. Then we make it louder, and just like that, a new fire lit. They weren't defending her work anymore. They were defending her voice. And Naomi had only just begun to speak. The article made its rounds fast, first in quiet faculty email threads, then on encrypted forums for math theory enthusiasts, then a tweet. Short, blunt, with a screenshot of Naomi's equation under a European researcher's name and the words. Funny how this showed up 3 days after a high schooler solved it on a chalkboard in California. It spread. Not viral, but fast enough to raise eyebrows in the right places. Naomi watched the screen flicker from her grandmother's couch. Her phone buzzed every 10 minutes. Journalists, bloggers, even 2 small science podcasts had reached out. Dr. Marshall called that night. They're investigating. The journal is requesting all original notes, timestamps, session logs. I've submitted everything we have. Naomi's voice was small. Will they believe it? Marshall didn't answer right away. Then, they're starting to. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part came 2 days later. Naomi received a direct message from the researcher who had published her work. Dr. Erich Dittmar, mid-40s, Polish-German, multiple papers on complex quantum topology, a big name in the right circles. The message read, "Your contribution is clear. This has escalated beyond intention. I propose a joint authorship revision. Your name added to the published work. You'll be credited and compensated." Naomi stared at the screen, heart pounding. Dr. Marshall was furious. This is textbook containment. He's not admitting theft. He's offering to split credit, so he doesn't get exposed. And if you agree, he gets to say it was a collaboration all along. Naomi sat at the edge of her bed. "It would make it go away," she said. Marshall's voice softened. "Yes, it would. And you'd have a line in a prestigious journal. Recognition. Maybe even job offer someday. But I wouldn't be the one who published it." "No," Marshall said. "You'd be the girl who gave someone else a clean exit." Naomi was quiet. Her grandmother knocked gently, brought in a cup of tea, said nothing, just kissed Naomi's head and left. And Naomi stared at her phone. Dr. Dittmar had sent another message. "I believe we can turn this into a positive. The world doesn't need controversy. It needs progress. Let's be pragmatic." It was tempting. Safety. Simplicity. But also silence. And then she thought of the other girls who sat in math class pretending not to care. The ones who never raised their hands. The ones who had to be smarter than everyone in the room just to be seen as average. She picked up her notebook, opened a new page, wrote one word, "No," then typed her reply. "I decline joint authorship. The work is mine. You can choose to retract, or I will go public with the full timeline, screenshots, witnesses, everything." She didn't wait for an answer. She called Marshall. "Let's publish," she said. "Properly. With my name. With the proof. Let's make it undeniable." The silence on the other end cracked into a laugh. "You sure you're 17? "No," Naomi said. "But I'm sure I'm done shrinking." The next morning, Marshall sent the final package to the Journal of Emerging Mathematical Theory. With Naomi's full name, bio, notebook scans, recorded lecture timestamp, they submitted it all. Naomi had chosen the harder path. No shortcuts, no protection. But maybe, just maybe, a future that belonged to her alone. 3 weeks later, Naomi sat in the library, not at her school, but at Berkeley, not as a visitor, as a fellow. The Journal of Emerging Mathematical Theory had reviewed the submission, requested clarifications, and returned with a rare decision. Accepted. Unanimously. With one note. This submission presents a novel insight that simplifies current approaches to boundary collapse in quantum variance analysis. Authored by Naomi Clark, age 17, Oakland Public Schools. It didn't go viral, but in the math world, it exploded. Naomi's inbox filled with invitations, summer institutes, mentorship programs, offers from think tanks that had never before considered a public school student from East Oakland. One evening, she sat across from Dr. Marshall again, this time in a more formal setting, an office with books stacked high and sunlight streaming through old windows. "You've got a decision to make," Marshall said. Naomi already knew. "About college?" "No," Marshall replied. "About your voice." She slid a laptop toward Naomi. A video was paused on the screen. Naomi's board, from that day, captured on a student's phone, posted anonymously. It had over 300,000 views. The comment section was filled with questions and stories, people talking about when they'd been overlooked, about what they might have done differently if they'd had someone like Naomi to watch. "She's better than half the faculty." One comment read, Another, why aren't more kids like her on stage? Naomi closed the laptop slowly. I never wanted attention, she said. You didn't want injustice either, Marshall replied. The next day, Naomi gave her first talk, not to a crowd of scientists, but to a classroom of 6th grade girls at a public school 5 blocks from where she lived. She didn't start with equations. She started with a photo of the chalkboard and said, "This changed everything, because someone tried to tell me I wasn't supposed to touch it." Then she pulled out a piece of chalk and wrote one word on the whiteboard, possible. The girls leaned forward. Naomi smiled. That week, her old math teacher invited her back to speak to the high school. Naomi brought her notebooks, the same ones. She used to hide in the back of her dresser. She passed them around. Let students flip through them. They saw pages with mistakes, scribbles, arrows, corrections. This is what brilliance looks like, Naomi said. It's messy, it's uncertain, it's quiet sometimes, but it's yours, the principal cried. Meanwhile, back at Berkeley, Dr. Weber resigned from his departmental oversight role. No one said it was connected, but everyone knew. He still taught, but his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. People remembered. Not just the challenge, but who tried to silence the answer. Naomi never gloated, never posted statements, never did interviews, unless they were about the math. She just kept working. 2 more journals accepted her ideas. One was co-authored with a research team she'd met through Marshall. They asked to list her as first author. She agreed, but insisted all contributors be named equally. She said, the math should come first. She meant it, but people came next. And her story, that was becoming something even math couldn't quantify. Because in a world that still struggles to recognize brilliance without a brand name, Naomi had built one for herself. Not to sell anything, but to open the door wider for whoever comes next. It's easy to celebrate the victories. It's harder to recognize the invisible miles that came before them. The nights spent wondering if your voice matters, the hours you work in silence, hoping someone, anyone, might see the shape of your brilliance. Naomi Clark didn't win because the system allowed her to. She won because she refused to be erased, and in doing so, she carved a space not just for herself, but for the next Naomi, and the next, and the one after that. She wasn't trained to fight with her name, but she learned. She wasn't taught to protect her ideas, but she figured it out. She wasn't born into a place where her voice would echo in lecture halls, but she echoed anyway. And that echo? It reached people she may never meet. So maybe the real question isn't how Naomi succeeded. Maybe it's how many others are still out there waiting for their chance to be heard. Maybe it's how many ideas have we already lost because someone didn't fit the mold? What about you? Have you ever felt overlooked? Dismissed because of how you looked, where you came from, or how quietly you carried your brilliance? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the light someone else is waiting for. And if Naomi's story reminded you of someone in your life, someone brilliant, someone brave, someone unseen, send this to them. Let them know. We see them now. Hey, if you stayed until now, thank you. That means you felt it. The quiet power behind Naomi's story. The strength it takes to rise when no one expects you to. The courage to speak when the world has learned to look past you. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors. They're invitations. So if you're watching this from your bedroom, or during a break at work, or maybe on a bus ride home, know this. You don't need permission to be extraordinary. You don't need titles to be brilliant, and you are not alone. We share these stories because they remind us what's possible when someone dares to step forward, even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when no one claps. So if this moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Join our community of story lovers and quiet warriors. Because the world needs more of this, and we're just getting started.